Hello and welcome to the This Month in Cybersecurity for February 2019. I guess the good news about doing this webinar each month, while it's consistent in terms of the timing, it's always the last Tuesday and it's always 30 minutes. The good news is it's always different, right? Because there's always something new going on. So try to bring those to the forefold. Obviously we get some good consistency in the framework that we try to highlight as the first slide every time. In an ideal world, we would take all of these events that we're seeing and we would, talk about how we identified these. And I think just you attending the webinar is part of it. We talk usually about some protection strategies or how you might see this in your environment, detection, and how you might respond, whether it be a people, process, or a technology choice for responding to it. But whether you use that model or this model, they both say the same thing, which is there are various columns to security. It's good to focus equally on reaction as it is to prevention. It's good to have good detection at the heart of things. Not every organization can do all of this themselves, and we try to be thought leaders, I guess, in the space. And to that degree, very just happy that you're attending our webinar and listening, as we usually take this and formulate a snippet thereafter, maybe a 2-minute recap of what it is we said, and some blogs, and all of our PowerPoint slides are available right after, maybe within 24 hours after the webinar. So this month, in good old February, and a lot of this stuff happened late in the month, ironically, we're going to pick on a few people. First, we're going to pick on Google. Right? Last week, they got caught with an announcement of one of their security products listed right there that can now be talked to for control, right? You can now talk to it. And everyone's like, hold on a second. We didn't even know that thing had a microphone. Oh, yeah, we put a microphone in there. We just didn't tell you about it. And it was disabled by default. Well, interestingly, we'll kind of chat through some of their products, I guess. But don't worry, we're equally going to pick on Microsoft. This month, they only released 77 patches for you to get out to your workstations and servers within as short a time frame as possible. We're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about phishing and how phishing is now being done with nets and kind of what that means. There's a method of phishing that's evading normal antivirus, anti-malware scanners, and I want to make sure you're aware of it. There is something going on, it has a clever name, called DNS espionage. Not to be, so that's DNS. Espionage for some recent DNS hijacking that's been going on. I want to make sure you're aware of what's happening there and how that might impact you, and some solutions to potentially solve that. We're going to talk about a new term, but hopefully it has not impacted you. But there is something going on called FormJacking, and we're going to discuss the rapid increase of FormJacking and how that's coming into play, and how it uses some JavaScript to send your credentials to 2 locations. And we're going to just discuss one item, maybe a good read in something called the Global Threat Report, which doesn't have things I could summarize too easily, but I just want to kind of point out maybe a few areas in the index from that guide for further reading moving forward. So let's dive into our first story. As you'll recall, our first story was around some of the NIST products. Some of the products that do have microphones are the ones that are being shown on the screen. The NIST Guard Hub, the first one. Protect, which is a fire detection system. Just the Generation 2 has a microphone in it. And it's only, they claim, only for listening in your house to make sure that the alarm does go off. The third product is obviously the TMIC. And the fourth is your Hello. Some of those I think you kind of expect to have a microphone, but as products are coming out, right, they're deciding that microphones and listening devices, whether they be in your home or your organization, are increasingly powerful, right? And they're having audio control of these devices and or listening to sounds. It's relatively inexpensive for them to add the hardware in there, and taking advantage of that hardware, even if it's for some future purpose, maybe they disable it by default. But I think a good little lesson learned by Google from a customer perspective, not notifying and not listing a microphone in their specifications, and saying, hey, don't worry, it's off by default. The good news is that the Nest thermometers, at least the current versions that are out there, do not have a microphone, right? So put a little X through that. That's good news because a lot of people purchase those Nest thermometers, but you can only imagine, wouldn't you want to control your Nest thermometers with the same voice commands potentially in a future model? I can only imagine that might be a future capability. And as you might recall from last month, we had the cameras, the Nest cameras that were kind of being overtaken by some people, and there was videos of people talking inside people's houses, right? Here's their protection system talking to them, and it would be a hacker who would basically use default credentials to get into their Nest cameras and use them for purposes of watching or listening, which felt like a big privacy invasion. And indeed, we can go on about that, but what I decided to focus on instead is just all the stupid defaults that are out there. And by stupid, I mean irrational, or things that you just wish they weren't this way. And certainly, number one up there are Nest cameras. They have a default admin and login and password, right? And that's what people were taking advantage of, and that was our story from last month. I listed a few others that just have, crossed our paths. Office 365 by default didn't have auditing turned on until about 3 months ago. They decided, oh yeah, I guess we should turn auditing on. Well, there's some great expense, if you will, to turning auditing on from Microsoft's perspective. There's no expense to a customer. It's certainly been a recommended setting for us for several years. It's just boneheaded, it seems. Teams, a lot of times vendors lead towards functionality first and maybe security second. And this third example, Teams allowing anonymous join for meetings. That's great as long as you know who those people are that are joining meetings and listening. SQL has a login of SA with a password of blank by default when it installs. Firewalls or routers when people are putting in any statements. Yes, that allows the people to get through the firewall, and that certainly enables your application to do its conversation, but it also really kind of neuters the firewall or router from having any security capabilities that it might have needed. So in general, I guess I kind of wanted to just make sure that that vendors' typical stance is to enhance productivity and differentiate with their products, and your stance has to be to provide secure and reliable access to the features as business needs dictate. And then it's not okay to just install products and features into your environment without expert level knowledge of what's going on. So introduce new products cautiously. That's the lesson. All right, number 2, Patch Tuesday. Number of items here that I just kind of walk through. Lower left-hand corner, Microsoft released 77 patches. I don't exactly know how many were critical, but I'm thinking it's in the dozens. So these critical patches need to get on your servers in the next week, 2 weeks, something less than 30 days. One of the patches is taking advantage of Internet Explorer, which I know you're thinking, we don't have much Internet Explorer out there. Run some tools. Find out if you do. Internet Explorer, as we know, was installed by default with many, Windows 2008 and even Windows 7 systems. It's a 0-day issue, meaning there's no fix for it yet, with the exception of this patch. It has been exploited in the wild, and one of the problems with it is through Internet Explorer, they were able, outside organizations that were able to access that device that had Internet Explorer on it. There's no further detail other than they're able to look for files on a disk. They believe that nation states have been using this to look for certain files through an Internet Explorer vulnerability. Number 2 issue that was of note was the DHCP server. I would say 90% of you, maybe 95% of you, have DHCP services on a Windows server today. And an attacker who can send malformed DHCP packets, meaning if they get inside and are able to send packets to those servers, can hijack the underlying server. Okay, so that's what's being exposed. It's a critical vulnerability, and it's around your DHCP services. Number 3 in the upper right-hand corner, Exchange 2013 or higher, right? So that's Exchange 2013, 16, or if anyone happens to have Exchange 2019. We haven't done any installs, as far as I know, recently of 2019, but certainly 2013 and 16 are out there. And while it has not been explored in the wild, they were able to show last month, I think this was in January timeframe, a proof of concept how something called PRIV Exchange, P-R-I-V Exchange, which is some publicly available code, was able to escalate an attacker's access from a lowly hacked inbox to admin privileges on a company's internal domain controller. So one hacked inbox to having credentials, admin level credentials within AD. Pretty nasty stuff. And last but not final, or last and final, is something called SMB, which is a protocol that's used to share files. There have been a fair number of vulnerabilities in the past around that dealt with authentication. In this particular case, it's not about authentication. It still uses SMB authentication, but unfortunately it takes advantage of an exposure. So if you used bad passwords, if you will, on your Windows servers, they can do common password dictionary attacks against that, and spread things very similar to WannaCry and NotPetya ransomware outbreaks. It's the same similar vulnerability. So SMB, DHCP, Exchange, and Internet Explorer are the big patches for the month, and your goal is to get the patches out as quick as possible. If you have difficulty doing that, know that we patch over 2,000 systems a month, systems and workstations. We have an automated system for doing it. And if you really want to get out of the game of even worrying about this on a month-by-month basis, in addition to patching, we also have a service called Complete Server Management, where for your first 5 servers, they're going to range in cost, kind of depending on whether you've got a clean or more complex environment, somewhere between $80 and $120 a server for your first 5 servers, about half the price for servers beyond number 5. But in general, we'll just take it over, right? We'll own the whole thing. We'll own the patching. We'll own the antivirus. We'll own all the support issues. We will report on trending, 24/7 alerting, 24/7 support and response. So know that service is available if you want to kind of get out of the server game and just move on with life and move on to other projects. In terms of the third story, the term that you'll want to see is highlighted there, no relationship. This was our phishing with nets. Okay, there's been some new developments. They just came out here in February, where effectively the no relationship documents are passing right through all the scanners. This includes Office 365 Exchange Online Protection. This includes Proofpoint, and this includes F-Secure as examples. These are cloud-based, front-leading, market-leading products that are unable to detect this problem. And here's what the issue is. The reason why it's called no relationship is because these are Office documents, generally Office documents, whether they be Excel, PowerPoint, Word documents. They basically are XML files that have something called a relationship file. And the relationship file, kind of think of it as like an index. It contains all the images and other items that might be contained. Oftentimes, that's the only thing that scanners would look at. And if you didn't see any problems with the relationship file, it passed the file on through. Indeed, the other files that are not the relationship files, but I call it the source files, can contain links in them that might be malicious. And so these malicious links, so what the hackers are doing is basically getting rid of the relationship file. So all the other files are there, but not the relationship file. Scanner doesn't know what to do with it, so it's passing it on, and it contains malicious links. People that are protected are people that are using Microsoft's ATP, Mimecast, Avanan, or other third-party products that don't trust zero-day scanners, and basically just because there's a signature on it, they basically blow up every file and try to determine if there's a problem with it. So having good technology standing behind things, as a reminder, Microsoft's ATP product not only has things called safe links and safe attachments, where it's scanning for zero-day viruses or zero-day malware issues like this. It also has some anti-phishing capability to protect you from people sending that you might not have a relationship with. So if it's coming from a strange domain, or a domain has been altered, it basically starts to look at that and says, hey, you know what, that seems quote unquote fishy, no pun intended. Well, all right, pun was intended, and it basically flags it with a big banner or a block of that phishing email. So again, Office 365 offers Exchange Online protection. That's a service that I have to imagine will be enhanced here shortly to take care of this no attachment or no relationship file. But for now, did pass through a number of documents that were unsafe. And Advanced Threat Protection offers you the safe attachment detonation chamber on the left-hand side for zero-day viruses. Other things that I think can help you here is the idea of other things that can kind of pass through. So we're seeing, in terms of phishing, we're seeing people that are logging in, doing foreign mailbox logins. We're seeing people forwarding messages, maybe purposely, maybe sometimes accidentally, out to their Gmail. We're seeing protocols for accessing mailboxes such as IMAP and POP3. We're looking for mailboxes that should have been deleted, but for some reason the administrator disabled the account but left the mailbox there, things of that nature. We're looking for strange delegate access, where suddenly Joe has got access to Susie's mailbox, and that really was not intended. So that's kind of a new delegation. Remember, all it takes sometimes is a simple hacked mailbox, and some of the data that resides in a mailbox can be important. So turning on auditing and making sure that your auditing is turned on, all of these services are available and checked on a daily basis with our security audit for Office 365. So if there's a goal to tighten security with regards to Office 365, we certainly love ATP as a technology. And as a process, we rely extensively, as do our customers, on the security audit for Office 365. Our fourth story, kind of an interesting one. DNS is not a topic we talk about often. It's a little bit techy. For those that know about DNS, DNS is essentially a finding service. So if you type in your browser, google.com, DNS has to convert Google to some IP addresses and go find you those actual servers on the internet. And similarly, if you have an IP address, it finds you a server. Just about every web request that goes out there, whether it be for an application, your Outlook, anything you're typing in a browser, all of that stuff stops at DNS first and then goes out and finds your resource, whether it be on your local network or on the internet. So DNS is the underlying service for everything, right? And one of the problems that has occurred is DNS, there's several records. So DNS has a number of records for where things are at, and effectively there was a exposure in DNS that started surfacing, I'll call it October, November, December, the last quarter of last year. The DNS records at these registrars are the people that own your records, they were unknowingly changed. And specifically, they were changed for governments areas, and specifically not inside this country. They were typically foreign countries. But by changing DNS records, what they were doing is they were essentially duplicating and redirecting traffic to all the sites that you see there. Okay, Outlook Web Access for the government of Cyprus. You might not care, right? But certainly the residents of Cyprus care. and Lebanon Ministry of Finance and so forth. So there's a long laundry list of foreign government traffic that was redirected to locations that they're not sure where they were redirected to. Those could be all the mail records, all the server requests, any traffic going to those sites was redirected for a period of time. Our own U.S. Department of Homeland Security picked up on this in the Q4 and basically, in a very unusual step in January, ordered all of the U.S. federal civilian agencies, that's everything from Social Security to others, a rare emergency directive to secure the login credentials for their internet domain records, meaning make sure you know who's able to log in and make those changes. And in general, that problem is still ongoing. I think from a U.S. Homeland perspective, I don't know of any incidents where this affected any U.S. government agencies, but it's a large problem. There's a lot of traffic that got redirected and a lot of records that are now suspect for a lot of governments. If you look at this, and so that's on the global stage. At a local level, your DNS is just as important as the federal government. It's important to you. It's important that the traffic not get redirected, and it's an area that needs care and feeding. And to the point that's listed on there, that was from major security experts that basically were just saying, this is their quote, right? Most organizations don't pay attention to this stuff because you don't know that it's the underlying service. And so some of the things that they were recommending, and I put this into, call it process and tools or process and technology. Two-factor authentication. Who's allowed to make record changes for your organization? If you don't know, then go find out. What are your records today? You should have MX records, A records. What are those records? Who set the records up? Commonly, we'll go in and look at people's DNS records, and they'll be like, oh, yeah, our former administrator set those up. And oh, whoops, he still has access. You don't want that. Right? Last thing you need is your web traffic. You're having a bad day when your A record has been modified to somewhere new and different. And these records, keep in mind, are good for everything. Like your auto-discover records are for Outlook talking to your mail server. So if suddenly all the people in your organization can't chat with your mail server because you didn't lock down those records, then it's shame on us from a process perspective. There are some tools that had been recommended, one called Registry Lock. And then I wanted to introduce the idea that Peters & Associates is strongly evaluating and certainly starting to pilot with two customers the Umbrella. So we're ramping internally. This Umbrella is a product that used to be called OpenDNS, and then Cisco came and purchased Umbrella. And Umbrella is basically a secured DNS that allows you to just imagine, rather than blocking every link that comes into your organization or evaluating every link at the front door, this is also protecting the web browsers as they go out to go click on a link. Let's say they got an email that had a link in it that didn't get blocked by a scanner. When they go to click on that link, it's going to first go to DNS before going to the server. Well, if the DNS is protected and it basically has a filter on it that says, I can't go to that site, that site's one of our known spamming sites, then it's going to block the traffic going outbound. So in general, the Umbrella product is a very interesting foray that might be a consideration for you in the future. All right, fifth story, and this one's pretty quick, FormJacking. I think we chatted about this a few months ago. It's also got another, the group that's responsible for doing, I'd say 90% plus of the FormJacking is an organization called MageCart, foreign entity. They've successfully done this at large sites like Ticketmaster and British Airways. They're essentially injecting a malicious script that, as you kind of see on the graphic there, duplicates the transaction into two locations. One that's legitimate, so you think, oh great, I got my Amazon order, or I got my British Airways ticket. And secondly, it also took your credit card, your name, and forwarded it off to some other site. Great. What do you do about it? Well, you get good web web and malware software on your servers, that's aware of this. Symantec is advertising themselves as having that capability. We also offer WebRoot for servers and workstations, which equally has that capability. So, sixth and final, and I usually don't have this many stories, but this month I just wanted to point out that this Global Risks Report highlighted a few stories I thought that might be, they're relatively long reads, but if anyone had interest in the security aspect of what this World Economic Forum thinks are global risks, meaning they do this on an annual basis and have been for about 20 years, the largest global risks they can think of are kind of listed along there, and some of them are technology-based that I've highlighted in red squares there. So good areas to read if you want to kind of look at the security of food systems or transformation of biological risks and how technology impacts that. I thought those would be interesting. So that said, just want to make sure you're aware if you have a desire to do free phishing tests. We had, 3 or 4 customers take us up on this in the last couple of weeks where we're doing some phishing tests just to see how well their employees are scoring. Or if you have Office 365 and have some concerns regarding security, we certainly have some free trials in that space too. And then 2 events I want to make sure you're aware of on the left. Obviously this month in cybersecurity, love for you to sign up for March. Again, we'll see. We have no idea what the month's going to bring, but bring it on and hope that none of us get impacted. And thanks for attending. We also have an in-person event that's going to be at Michael Jordan's. We're going to be discussing Cisco Meraki's, which is part of your physical security and your ability to record and audit events, changes, or looking for behavior patterns that might not be normal within spaces that might have some confidentiality to it, whether it be your server room, front door of your buildings, storage rooms, HR files. There's physical security is coming on as a really interesting area, and that's one of the reasons why Peters has engaged with Cisco Meraki. We actually leverage Cisco Meraki cameras at our facility. Put some of our recent blogs over on the right-hand side. Check out our site. We try to post 2 or 3 new blogs a week. That is it. Thanks for attending and listening.